The mining station Kepler 442b hummed with the steady rhythm of extraction equipment, its metallic corridors echoing with the footsteps of various species going about their daily routines. Commander Zethkar of the Hegemony stood before the massive viewport in his office, watching human workers operate the heavy machinery with their characteristic persistence. The blue-skinned Vrex officer's mandibles clicked in what his species considered contemplation, though the sound always made humans nervous. Sarah Chen wiped the sweat from her brow as she guided another load of processed rare earth minerals toward the transport bay. The artificial gravity kept everything stable, but the work was backbreaking nonetheless. She had been working the Kepler mining operation for 3 standard years, sending credits back to her family on Earth while her daughter attended university. The pay was good, the work honest, and, despite the occasional tension with some of the alien overseers, most humans here just kept their heads down and did their jobs. Shun. Report to command immediately. The voice crackled through the station's communication system and accented standard galactic. Sarah recognized the harsh tones of Supervisor Crix, a particularly unpleasant hegemony enforcer who seemed to take special pleasure in making human workers uncomfortable. Sarah made her way through the winding corridors, nodding to fellow workers from various species. The station housed over 10,000 beings from across the galaxy, but humans made up nearly 60% of the workforce. They were valued for their endurance, adaptability, and what the hegemony classified as their acceptable intelligence levels for manual labor. What the aliens didn't quite grasp was how deeply humans observed everything around them, filing away details that might prove important later. The command center doors hissed open, revealing the sterile white walls and holographic displays that monitored every aspect of the mining operation. Commander Zethkar stood with his back to her, while Supervisor Crix paced nearby, his reptilian features twisted in what Sarah had learned to recognize as satisfaction. Human Shen, Zethkar said without turning around, there has been an incident in Mining Sector 7. Equipment damage. Significant equipment damage. His translated words carried an ominous weight. Sarah kept her expression neutral. Sir, I've been working Sector 12 all shift. My logs will show. Your logs show you were in Sector 7 2 days ago, Crix interrupted, his forked tongue flicking out as he spoke. The damage was discovered this morning. Sabotage is suspected. The accusation hit Sarah like a physical blow. She had indeed been in Sector 7 2 days prior, performing routine maintenance on the atmospheric processors. It was standard work, logged in, supervised. But she could see where this was heading. Sir, with respect, I performed authorized maintenance in that sector. All work was logged in, supervised by Technician Vorth. The equipment was functioning normally when I left. Zethkar finally turned, his large dark eyes studying her with an intensity that made her skin crawl. The Vrex had a disturbing habit of staring too long, as if they were cataloging every micro-expression for future reference. Technician Vorth has been reassigned to another facility, Zethkar said slowly. His testimony is unavailable. However, the damage pattern is consistent with human tool usage. The insurance authority requires accountability. Sarah felt her heart rate increase, but kept her voice steady. Commander, I request a full investigation. Security footage, tool logs, materials analysis. My record here is clean. Crix made a sound that might have been laughter in his species. Human worker requests investigation? How amusing. The matter is settled. You will compensate the hegemony for damages, 47,000 credits. The number hit Sarah like a sledgehammer. It represented nearly 2 years of her salary, money she didn't have and couldn't hope to raise. Her daughter's education fund, her family's emergency savings, everything would be wiped out and she would still owe more than she could pay. That's impossible, she said, her voice tight. I don't have that kind of money. And I didn't cause any damage. Then, you will work extended terms to pay the debt, Zethkar replied matter-of-factly. Your contract is hereby extended for an additional 6 years at reduced compensation until the debt is satisfied. Sarah stared at them both, understanding dawning. This wasn't about damaged equipment. This was about creating debt slavery, trapping her in an impossible situation. She had heard rumors of other human workers facing similar accusations, mysterious equipment failures always traced back to human involvement, always resulting in extended contracts and impossible debt. I want to contact Earth, she said firmly. I have the right to speak with a human advocacy representative. Crix and Zethkar exchanged a look that Sarah caught, a brief moment of communication in their own language before switching back to Standard Galactic. Communication arrays are currently undergoing maintenance, Zethkar said smoothly. External communications are restricted for the next 30 standard days. Security precaution. Sarah felt the trap closing around her. No communication with Earth, no way to contact human authorities, no legal representation. She was completely isolated, faced with an impossible debt and an extended contract that would keep her here for years while her family wondered what had happened to her. You have 1 standard day to accept the terms, Crix added with obvious satisfaction. Refusal will result in criminal charges and imprisonment. I suggest you choose wisely, human. As Sarah left the command center, her mind raced. She wasn't the first human this had happened to, and she wouldn't be the last. But what the hegemony didn't understand was that humans talked to each other. They shared information, they planned, and, when cornered, they became very dangerous indeed. That evening, Sarah met with 3 other human workers in the dimly lit recreation area. Tom Rodriguez had been trapped in extended contract for 8 months after allegedly damaging a power coupling. Maria Santos faced similar accusations regarding atmospheric systems. James Wright had been accused of theft, though the missing materials mysteriously reappeared after his contract extension was signed. They're systematically targeting us, Sarah said quietly, keeping her voice low enough to avoid the hegemony's monitoring systems. Creating false claims to extend our contracts indefinitely. It's not just here, Tom added grimly. My brother works Titan Station. Same pattern. Humans getting blamed for mysterious equipment failures, impossible debts, extended contracts. It's happening across multiple facilities. Maria leaned forward. My cousin is a communications officer on a hegemony trade vessel. She says there are rumors about new regulations coming down, restrictions on human workers' rights. They're planning to make us all essentially indentured servants. The weight of the revelation settled over them. This wasn't isolated incidents of corruption or individual supervisor abuse. This was systematic, coordinated, and it was happening to human workers across hegemony space. James pulled out a small data pad, checking for surveillance before speaking. I'd been documenting everything. Times, dates, supervisor actions, false accusations. If we could somehow get this information to Earth. Communication blackout, Sarah reminded him. They've cut us off. Tom's jaw tightened with determination. Then, we make our own communication. My background is electrical engineering. Maria knows the communication systems better than anyone. And, Sarah, your maintenance access could get us to places we need to go. Sarah looked at each of them, seeing the same resolve she felt burning inside. The hegemony had made a critical error. They assumed humans would accept their fate quietly, that they would submit to systematic oppression without resistance. They had underestimated what happened when humans were pushed too far. We need more than just documentation, Sarah said slowly. We need evidence of the systematic nature, proof of coordination between facilities, and we need a way to get that information to Earth. And we need to be very careful, Maria added. One mistake and we all end up in hegemony prisons. Or worse. As they began to plan, none of them fully understood the magnitude of what they were setting in motion. The hegemony had spent decades quietly implementing their human subjugation program, believing the species too fragmented and passive to mount effective resistance. They were about to learn how wrong they were. Across the galaxy, similar conversations were happening in mining stations, trade vessels, and industrial facilities. Humans were beginning to connect the dots, sharing information through whispered conversations and coded messages. The hegemony's systematic oppression was about to meet humanity's most dangerous trait, their absolute refusal to remain victims. The first sparks of what would become known as the human uprising were being lit in 1,000 different locations, by ordinary people who had simply been pushed too far. The hegemony had forgotten a fundamental truth about humans that every species in the galaxy would soon learn. When you back a human into a corner, when you threaten everything they hold dear, when you try to break their spirit and steal their freedom, you don't get submission. You get war. 3 weeks after Sarah's confrontation with Commander Zethkar, the human resistance network on Kepler 442b had grown from 4 workers to nearly 300. What started as whispered conversations had evolved into a sophisticated intelligence operation that would have impressed military strategists across the galaxy. The humans had discovered something the hegemony never suspected: their species' natural talent for pattern recognition and systematic thinking made them exceptionally good at espionage. Every human worker became a sensor, cataloging unusual activities, recording conversations, and documenting the systematic oppression that was being implemented across hegemony space. Maria Santos had proven particularly valuable in their efforts. Her access to communication systems allowed her to discover that the communication blackout was not maintenance at all, but a deliberate isolation protocol being implemented across 17 different facilities simultaneously. More disturbing, she had uncovered evidence that similar blackouts were planned for human civilian settlements on the Outer Rim worlds. "It's bigger than we thought," she reported to the growing leadership council that met secretly in the abandoned sections of the mining station's lower levels. "They're not just trying to control human workers. They're planning to isolate entire human populations." Tom Rodriguez had been equally productive, using his engineering background to map the station's complete infrastructure. What he discovered changed everything they thought they knew about their situation. The mining station wasn't just a resource extraction facility. Hidden beneath the legitimate operations were massive weapons manufacturing plants, communications hubs, and what appeared to be military staging areas. "We're not just workers on a mining station," he explained to the assembled group. "We're slave labor building weapons that will be used to subjugate our own species. Every rare earth mineral we extract, every component we manufacture, it's all going toward military equipment." Sarah felt sick as the implications became clear. The humans on Kepler 442b weren't just victims of systematic oppression. They were unwitting collaborators in their own species' enslavement. The guilt was overwhelming, but it also crystallized their determination to act. James Wright had perhaps made the most crucial discovery of all. His investigation into the false accusations against human workers had revealed the existence of what the hegemony called the Human Problem Resolution Protocol. The document, which he had carefully photographed using hidden cameras, outlined a galaxy-wide plan to reduce human autonomy through systematic debt enslavement, communication isolation, and eventual population controls. According to this protocol, James explained, his voice tight with controlled anger, humans are classified as a problematic species due to our adaptability, curiosity, and what they term excessive individual initiative. The goal is to reduce our population to manageable levels while maintaining us as a controlled labor force. The room fell silent as the full scope of the threat became clear. This wasn't about mining rights or labor disputes. This was about the systematic elimination of human freedom, and, ultimately, human existence as an independent species. Dr. Elizabeth Foster, a xenobiologist who had been working on the station's life support systems, spoke up for the first time. "There's something else. I've been monitoring the biological systems, and I've noticed unusual patterns in the atmospheric composition in human quarters. Trace amounts of compounds that don't belong in life support systems." The implications were chilling. Chemical modification of the atmosphere in human living areas suggested attempts at biological control, possibly affecting fertility, aggression levels, or cognitive function. "They're not just trying to control our actions," Sarah realized. "They're trying to control our biology." The revelation galvanized the group. What had started as an attempt to document workplace abuse had uncovered evidence of systematic genocide. The humans of Kepler 442b were sitting on information that could save their entire species, but they were trapped, isolated, and running out of time. "We need to get this information to Earth," Sarah said. "Not just our data, but everything. The weapons manufacturing, the population control protocols, the biological manipulation. Humanity needs to know what they're facing." Tom pulled up his infrastructure maps. "I've been working on this for weeks. There's a way to access the station's primary communication array, but it's heavily guarded and monitored. We'd need a massive distraction, and someone would have to get into the most secure section of the station." "More than that," Maria added. "Even if we get access, the communication systems are designed to prevent unauthorized transmissions. We'd need to modify the hardware, which would take time and leave obvious evidence." The group faced a seemingly impossible challenge. They needed to transmit vital information to Earth while surrounded by hostile aliens, using equipment designed to prevent exactly what they were trying to do, all while avoiding detection that would result in their deaths or imprisonment. It was Dr. Foster who proposed the solution that would change everything. "We don't fight their system," she said quietly. "We become their system. Every human on this station has access to different parts of the infrastructure. Maintenance workers, technicians, food service, medical staff, sanitation crews. If we coordinate properly, we can turn the entire station into a transmission device. The plan that emerged over the following days was audacious in its complexity and scope. Rather than attempting to access the primary communication array, they would turn the station's entire metal infrastructure into a massive antenna. Using their combined access to power systems, structural components, and maintenance networks, they could create a transmission system that the hegemony would never detect because it would be hidden within the station itself. The technical challenges were enormous. They needed to route power through systems never designed for transmission purposes, coordinate timing across hundreds of human workers, and do it all without triggering the thousands of monitoring systems throughout the station. But humans had one advantage that the hegemony had never properly understood: their ability to work together with an efficiency that bordered on telepathic. As word spread through the human community, something remarkable happened. Every human worker, regardless of their official role or personal concerns, volunteered to help. The woman who served food in the cafeteria offered to monitor hegemony personnel schedules. The sanitation workers provided access to areas no one else could reach. The medical staff offered to create diversions through emergency protocols. What emerged was not just a resistance cell, but a demonstration of human collective intelligence that would have terrified any hegemony strategist who understood its implications. 3,000 humans were coordinating their efforts with precision that military organizations would envy, all while maintaining the appearance of normal station operations. Commander Zethkar noticed that human productivity had actually increased during the past several weeks, which he attributed to their acceptance of their improved circumstances. Supervisor Crix was pleased that human workers seemed more focused and less prone to the complaints that had previously disrupted operations. Neither of them understood that they were witnessing the early stages of the most sophisticated resistance operation in galactic history. The transmission plan required perfect timing. Every human on the station would need to perform their assigned task within a 30-second window, creating a brief but powerful signal that would punch through hegemony communication blocks and reach Earth. The signal would carry everything they had learned: the weapons manufacturing, the population control protocols, the biological manipulation programs, and, most importantly, the locations of similar operations throughout hegemony space. As the day of the transmission approached, Sarah found herself thinking about her daughter back on Earth. The young woman was probably wondering why her mother's regular communications had stopped, possibly worried but trusting that everything was fine. Soon she would learn the truth about what humanity was facing, and Sarah hoped her daughter would understand why her mother had chosen to risk everything for information that could save their species. The night before the transmission, the human workers held what appeared to be a routine recreational gathering. To any hegemony observer, it looked like nothing more than humans engaging in their typical social behaviors. In reality, it was a final coordination meeting for an operation that would either save humanity or get them all killed. "Tomorrow we find out if we're heroes or martyrs," Tom said quietly. "We're already heroes," Sarah replied. "Tomorrow we find out if we're live heroes or dead ones." As the humans dispersed to their quarters, each carrying the knowledge of their crucial role in the next day's operation, none of them slept well. They were ordinary people about to attempt something extraordinary, using nothing but their intelligence, courage, and the one thing the hegemony had never managed to break: their absolute refusal to surrender. In 12 hours, the hegemony would learn what happened when you systematically oppressed humans. They would discover that beneath the seemingly compliant exterior of human workers lay minds capable of coordination and resistance that would reshape the balance of power in the galaxy. The signal would last only 30 seconds, but its effects would echo across space for generations. At exactly 14:30 station time, Sarachin initiated what would later be known as the Kepler transmission by activating a seemingly routine atmospheric recycling protocol. To any monitoring system, it appeared as standard maintenance. In reality, it was the opening move in the most coordinated resistance operation in human history. Across the massive mining station, 3,000 humans began their precisely timed dance. Maria Santos rerouted power through secondary conduits, creating an electrical pathway that turned the station's metal skeleton into a massive antenna. Tom Rodriguez activated emergency power reserves under the guise of testing backup systems, providing the energy needed for transmission. Dr. Foster triggered controlled atmospheric alarms that forced hegemony personnel to focus on life support readings instead of communication monitoring. The beauty of the plan lay in its simplicity. Every action appeared completely normal within each department's standard procedures. Only when viewed as a whole did the true scope of the operation become apparent, and, by then, it was far too late for the hegemony to respond. Commander Zethkar was reviewing productivity reports when the first indications of unusual activity appeared on his monitors. Multiple systems showed elevated activity levels, but each individual reading fell within normal parameters. His military instincts suggested something was amiss, but his rational mind could not identify any specific threat. Supervisor Crix, he called through the communication system. Report on current human worker activities. All human personnel are performing assigned duties, came the reply. Productivity levels are actually above normal today. The humans seem particularly motivated. Zethkar's mandibles clicked in thought. In his experience, motivated humans were often dangerous humans, though he could not determine why that thought troubled him so much. 30 seconds after Sarah's initial action, the modified station infrastructure achieved the impossible. A burst of coherent data, compressed and encoded with human ingenuity, punched through every communication barrier the hegemony had erected. The signal carried detailed documentation of the human problem resolution protocol, evidence of systematic oppression across 17 facilities, proof of weapons manufacturing using human labor, and, most critically, the biological modification programs affecting human populations. The transmission lasted exactly 31 seconds before safety protocols automatically shut down the improvised system. To hegemony monitoring stations, it appeared as a brief technical anomaly in the station's normal electromagnetic emissions. They had no idea that 31 seconds of data had just changed the course of galactic history. On Earth, the signal was received by the Deep Space Communications Array at Luna Station. The duty officer, Lieutenant Commander Rachel Morrison, initially dismissed the transmission as background noise from industrial operations. However, when the computer flagged unusual patterns in the signal, she decided to investigate further. What she discovered when she ran the data through decryption protocols made her blood run cold. Within 6 hours, every major government on Earth had received copies of the Kepler transmission. Within 12 hours, emergency sessions were convening in the United Nations, the Earth Defense Council, and the Colonial Administration Authority. Within 18 hours, every human settlement in known space was receiving priority alerts warning them of the hegemony's systematic oppression program. But, the most significant response came from a source that neither the hegemony nor even most humans knew existed. Captain Marcus Webb commanded the Earth Space Navy vessel Indomitable, one of 7 ships in humanity's most classified military program. For the past 15 years, Earth had been secretly developing advanced military technology based on recovered alien artifacts and breakthrough human innovations. The program was so secret that most Earth governments believed humanity's space-based military capabilities were limited to patrol vessels and cargo escorts. The truth was far different. The Indomitable and her sister ships represented military technology that rivaled anything in hegemony space. Humanity had spent decades learning from every alien species they encountered, adapting and improving technologies with the relentless innovation that made their species so dangerous. While the hegemony saw humans as useful laborers, human military strategists had been preparing for the day when that usefulness would make them targets. Signal received and confirmed. Command, Webb reported to Earth Space Navy headquarters. Requesting permission to implement Contingency 7. Contingency 7 was the protocol for defending human civilian populations from systematic alien oppression. It had been developed by strategists who understood that humanity's expansion into space would eventually bring them into conflict with species that viewed them as threats or resources to be exploited. Permission granted, Captain, came the reply from Admiral Chen, whose daughter happened to be working at a mining facility on Kepler 442b. All 7 ships are authorized for immediate deployment. Rules of engagement are weapons-free for any vessel or facility participating in the oppression of human civilians. The hegemony had made a fundamental error in their assessment of human military capabilities. They based their evaluation on the small patrol vessels and cargo ships that operated openly in their space, never suspecting that these represented only the most basic level of human technology. Back on Kepler 442b, the aftermath of the transmission was creating its own problems. The sophisticated coordination required for the operation had not gone completely unnoticed by hegemony security systems. While they had not detected the transmission itself, the level of synchronized human activity had triggered anomaly alerts in several monitoring stations. Supervisor Crix arrived at the command center with a growing sense of unease. "Commander, I am observing unusual patterns in human behavior. Too much coordination, too much efficiency. In my experience, humans are naturally chaotic. This level of organization suggests planning. Commander Zethkar studied the activity reports more carefully. You believe they are organizing resistance? I believe they are organizing something, Crix replied. Recommend immediate security protocols. Separate the humans, restrict their movement, interrogate the leaders. Zethkar considered the recommendation. Standard hegemony doctrine called for harsh responses to any signs of resistance from subject species. However, human workers were essential to station operations, and disrupting their efficiency would impact productivity quotas that he was required to meet. Implement partial restrictions, he decided. Limit human movement between sectors, increase monitoring in their quarters, and identify potential leadership figures for enhanced scrutiny. But maintain operational efficiency. The decision would prove to be another critical error. Partial restrictions would alert the humans to increased surveillance without actually preventing their continued coordination. Worse, it would convince them that their transmission had been successful and that they needed to prepare for hegemony retaliation. Sarah received word of the new restrictions through the same whisper network that had coordinated the transmission. Rather than discouraging the human resistance, the restrictions energized them with the knowledge that their desperate gamble had worked. They know something happened, she told the Leadership Council during an emergency meeting in the maintenance tunnels. The fact that they're implementing restrictions but not arrests means they suspect but can't prove anything. Tom was monitoring communication intercepts that Maria had managed to access. There's increased chatter between this station and Hegemony Command. They're requesting guidance on human population management, asking about protocols for suspected resistance activities. Which means, Dr. Foster added grimly, they're about to escalate their control measures. Whatever response Earth is planning, it needs to happen soon. James had been analyzing the security changes and reached a disturbing conclusion. The restriction patterns suggest they're preparing to isolate human quarters and implement emergency lockdown procedures. If they complete those modifications, we'll be effectively imprisoned with no ability to resist. The humans faced a dilemma. Their transmission had succeeded in warning Earth, but it had also alerted the hegemony to potential resistance. They needed to continue their operations to gather intelligence and maintain their ability to act, but increased surveillance made coordination much more dangerous. It was during this crucial period of decision-making that the first signs of Earth's response reached Kepler 442b. Maria was monitoring communication frequencies when she detected something that made her heart race. Hidden within routine shipping communications were coded signals using mathematical sequences that every Earth-educated human would recognize. The messages were brief and cryptic, but their meaning was clear. Earth had received the transmission and was responding. The coded signals contained coordinates, timing information, and, most importantly, instructions for human personnel to prepare for extraction or resistance support. Earth was not just acknowledging the Kepler transmission, they were actively preparing to rescue their people and respond to hegemony aggression. As news of Earth's response spread through the human population, something remarkable happened. The fear and desperation that had driven their initial resistance began to transform into something far more dangerous, hope combined with determination. 3,000 humans who had successfully coordinated the most sophisticated intelligence operation in their species' history now knew that their homeworld was coming to help them. They were no longer isolated victims hoping to send a warning. They were forward observers for what was about to become a very different kind of conflict. The hegemony was about to discover what happened when you didn't just threaten humans, but actually followed through on those threats while underestimating their response capabilities. They were about to learn that an enraged human population with nothing left to lose and everything to fight for represented the most dangerous force in the galaxy. Captain Marcus Webb studied the tactical display showing Kepler 442b mining station as his ship approached the system's outer edge. The Indomitable and her sister ships had made the journey in record time using technology that the hegemony didn't know humans possessed. Quantum slip drives, gravitic shields, and weapon systems that had been developed in absolute secrecy for exactly this scenario. Analysis complete, Captain, reported Lieutenant Commander Sarah Kim from the tactical station. The mining station is heavily defended, but not against threats of this magnitude. They're equipped to handle pirates and minor conflicts, not military engagement with advanced technology. What about human personnel? Webb asked. The primary mission was extraction, but rules of engagement allowed for significant latitude if human lives were threatened. Intelligence indicates approximately 3,000 human civilians on the station, along with roughly 7,000 hegemony personnel and workers from allied species. The humans appear to be concentrated in specific sectors, which suggests they've already been segregated. Webb's jaw tightened. Segregation was often the first step towards systematic elimination. Time to intercept? 14 minutes at current approach vector, replied the navigation officer. On Kepler 442b, Commander Zethkar was dealing with increasingly troubling reports. Human productivity had not decreased despite security restrictions, which violated every principle of subject species management he had been taught. Moreover, communication intercepts suggested increased chatter between human quarters, though the content remained frustratingly unclear. Sir, Supervisor Crix entered the command center with obvious agitation. We have detected unauthorized modifications to several critical systems. Power routing has been altered, communication pathways have been changed, and atmospheric controls show signs of tampering. Zethkar turned from his displays. Evidence of sabotage? Evidence of systematic infiltration, Crix corrected grimly. The humans have been accessing areas and systems far beyond their authorized duties. This level of coordination suggests military-level planning. The revelation changed everything. If humans were conducting military operations, then the situation had escalated beyond labor management into active rebellion. Hegemony doctrine was clear about the response to armed resistance from subject species. Implement Protocol 9 immediately, Zethkar ordered. All human personnel are to be confined to quarters pending investigation. Any resistance is to be met with appropriate force. Protocol 9 was essentially martial law for alien workers, designed to completely suppress any organized resistance through isolation and intimidation. It had never been used on humans before, but hegemony strategists were confident it would prove as effective as it had with other species. They were about to learn how wrong they were. Sarah Chen was conducting a routine maintenance inspection when the lockdown sirens began blaring throughout the station. The sound was followed immediately by automated announcements in multiple languages. All human personnel report to quarters immediately. Station lockdown is in effect. Compliance is mandatory. She ducked into a maintenance alcove and activated the emergency communication device that Tom had built from salvaged components. This is Sarah to all units. Protocol 9 is active. Implement Resistance Plan Charlie immediately. Resistance Plan Charlie was the contingency they had hoped never to use. It involved complete non-cooperation with hegemony authorities, protection of critical human personnel, and, if necessary, active sabotage of station systems to prevent their use against humans. The plan required every human on the station to risk their lives simultaneously. Across the mining station, 3,000 humans received Sarah's signal and began the most dangerous phase of their resistance. Rather than reporting to quarters as ordered, they moved to predetermined positions throughout the facility. Maintenance workers sealed themselves into critical system areas. Medical personnel barricaded themselves in the hospital. Food service workers secured the nutrition production facilities. In less than 30 minutes, humans had taken effective control of every system necessary for station operations while making it impossible for hegemony forces to remove them without destroying the infrastructure they needed to maintain. Sir! The communication officer's voice carried panic as he reported to Commander Zethkar. The humans are not complying with lockdown orders. They appear to have coordinated defensive positions throughout the station. Zethkar stared at the tactical display showing human positions. Instead of the scattered, frightened civilians he expected, the humans had positioned themselves with military precision to control critical infrastructure. How is this possible? These are miners and technicians, not soldiers. Sir, another officer interrupted. We're receiving priority communications from Hegemony Command. Long-range sensors have detected unidentified vessels approaching our position. The timing was too perfect to be coincidental. Human resistance coordinated with approaching ships suggested a level of planning that implied significant military support. Zethkar realized he was not dealing with a labor dispute or even a local rebellion. This was an invasion. Red alert, he ordered. All defensive systems online. Contact the Hegemony fleet and request immediate reinforcement. And prepare boarding teams to retake critical areas from the humans. The first boarding team to attempt retaking the power generation facility discovered that humans were far more dangerous than anyone had anticipated. The facility's human workers had spent weeks preparing defensive positions, using their intimate knowledge of the infrastructure to create choke points and ambush sites. More importantly, they had modified the systems themselves to serve as weapons. When hegemony soldiers forced their way into the power facility, they found themselves facing not just armed humans, but humans who could turn the station's own systems against them. Electrical conduits became weapons, atmospheric controls became crowd control devices, and the humans' knowledge of every pipe, wire, and system in the facility made them impossible to dislodge. The boarding team retreated after suffering casualties that were impossible to explain to Hegemony Command. How could trained soldiers be defeated by human miners? Tom Rodriguez coordinated the defense from the central maintenance hub, using the communication system he had built to direct human forces throughout the station. Maria cut power to security systems in sectors 7 through 12. James initiate atmospheric alarms in the command center. Dr. Foster prepare to release emergency medical containment protocols if they try to use gas against us. The humans were not just resisting, they were conducting sophisticated military operations using infrastructure and systems as weapons. Every modification they had made over the past months now served a tactical purpose, turning the station itself into a fortress designed specifically to counter hegemony tactics. Commander Zethkar watched his tactical situation deteriorate with growing horror. Half his security teams were trapped in areas controlled by humans, his critical systems were either shut down or under human control, and the approaching ships were now close enough to identify as advanced military vessels using technology he didn't recognize. "Sir, incoming transmission from the approaching fleet," the communication officer reported. On screen, Zethkar ordered. The image that appeared showed a human in military uniform standing on what was clearly an advanced spacecraft bridge. Captain Webb's expression was professional but carried an undertone of barely controlled anger. "Commander Zethkar, I am Captain Marcus Webb of the Earth Space Navy vessel Indomitable. You are in violation of interstellar law regarding the treatment of civilian populations. I am authorized to demand the immediate release of all human personnel under your custody." Zethkar felt his confidence crumble. Earth Space Navy vessels were supposed to be limited patrol ships with minimal military capability. The ship on his display showed technology that rivaled hegemony military vessels. "Captain Webb," he replied carefully, "this is a hegemony facility operating under established territorial agreements. Human personnel are employees, not prisoners." "Our intelligence indicates otherwise," Webb responded coldly. "We have documentation of systematic oppression, debt slavery, and biological modification programs targeting human civilians. You have 30 minutes to begin evacuation procedures for all human personnel, or we will implement them ourselves." The transmission ended, leaving Zethkar to contemplate an impossible situation. The approaching human fleet clearly possessed advanced military technology, the humans on his station had proven capable of sophisticated resistance operations, and his own forces were already being systematically defeated by what were supposed to be civilian workers. 28 minutes after Captain Webb's ultimatum, Commander Zethkar made the decision that would define the rest of his military career. Faced with human resistance fighters who had turned his own station against him and an Earth fleet that clearly possessed technology superior to his defensive capabilities, he chose to escalate rather than surrender. "Open fire on the human positions," he ordered. "If they want to use our infrastructure as weapons, we'll show them what happens when that infrastructure is destroyed." It was the worst possible decision. The moment hegemony forces opened fire on human civilians, every rule of engagement changed. Captain Webb received authorization to implement what Earth military doctrine classified as Total Response Protocol, the complete elimination of threats to human civilian populations. "All ships, weapons free," Webb commanded. Primary target is station command and control. Secondary targets are weapons systems and military personnel quarters. Avoid areas with human civilian concentrations. The Indomitable and her sister ships unleashed firepower that stunned everyone watching. Quantum torpedoes that phased through shields, gravitic cannons that crushed targets with localized gravity fields, and energy weapons that cut through hegemony armor like paper. The mining station's defenses, designed to repel pirates and minor threats, lasted less than 3 minutes against Earth military technology. But the real devastation came from something no one expected. Sarah Chen, coordinating human resistance from the power facility, made a decision that would become legend in human military history. As hegemony forces fired on her people, she activated the most dangerous protocol in their resistance plan, using the station's mining equipment as weapons. All units, implement scorched earth, she transmitted. If they want to kill us, we'll take their precious station with us. Across Kepler 442b, human workers began turning industrial equipment into instruments of destruction. Mining charges designed to break apart asteroids were redirected toward structural supports. Heavy machinery designed to move tons of ore began systematically destroying critical infrastructure. Atmospheric processors were overloaded to create explosive decompression in military sections. The humans weren't just fighting back, they were dismantling the entire operation piece by piece. Tom Rodriguez achieved what would later be called the engineering miracle by turning the station's own power grid into a massive electromagnetic pulse device. Using his weeks of infrastructure mapping, he routed the station's entire energy output through improvised coils and capacitors, creating a directed EMP burst that disabled every piece of hegemony technology in the command sections. Commander Zethkar found himself sitting in darkness, his command center completely dead, while explosions echoed through the station around him. In 30 minutes, his facility had gone from a profitable mining operation to a battlefield where human civilians were systematically destroying everything the hegemony had built. The resistance was no longer about escape or survival. It had become total war. Dr. Elizabeth Foster achieved perhaps the most terrifying demonstration of human ingenuity by turning the biological modification systems against their creators. The atmospheric control systems that had been used to chemically influence human behavior were reprogrammed to flood hegemony quarters with compounds that induced paralysis and disorientation in their species. If they want to experiment with our biology, she announced grimly, they can experience what it feels like to be test subjects themselves. Captain Webb watched the tactical display with professional admiration as human civilians conducted military operations that would have impressed experienced soldiers. Lieutenant Commander Kim, are you recording all of this? Yes, sir. Command will want complete documentation of civilian resistance capabilities. Good. Make sure you get everything. The galaxy needs to see what happens when humans are pushed too far. The battle for Kepler 442b lasted 6 hours and became the defining moment that changed humanity's relationship with every alien species in known space. When it was over, the hegemony mining operation had been completely destroyed, not by the Earth fleet's superior firepower, but by human civilians using nothing but industrial equipment and unbreakable determination. Of the 7,000 non-human personnel on the station, more than 4,000 had been killed or incapacitated by their own infrastructure turned against them. Of the 3,000 human civilians, fewer than 200 had been lost, and most of those were volunteers who had sacrificed themselves to protect evacuation routes. As Earthships began extracting human survivors, Sarah Chen found herself face to face with Captain Webb in the indomitable medical bay. Her hands were still shaking from 6 hours of coordinating resistance operations while under fire. Ma'am, Webb said formally, on behalf of the Earth Space Navy and the human species, I want to thank you for what you accomplished here today. We just did what we had to do, Sarah replied quietly. They thought we would submit. They thought they could break us down and make us slaves. They didn't understand what happens when you threaten human families. Webb nodded, understanding completely. Ma'am, what you and your people accomplished today is going to change everything. Every alien species in the galaxy is going to receive complete documentation of this operation. They're going to learn that humans can turn any environment into a weapon, that we can coordinate resistance operations that military strategists will study for decades, and that we will never, ever submit to systematic oppression. The message went out within hours. Complete recordings of the Kepler 442b operation, along with documentation of the hegemony's systematic oppression program, were transmitted to every known alien government in the galaxy. The images of human civilians turning mining equipment into weapons of war, coordinating sophisticated military operations, and choosing total destruction over submission sent shock waves through civilizations across space. The hegemony attempted damage control by claiming the mining station had been attacked by human military forces disguising themselves as civilians. The lie fell apart when detailed analysis showed that every piece of equipment used in the resistance had been modified using materials available only to station workers, and that the coordination had been achieved through improvised communication systems built from industrial components. 3,000 human miners had defeated a facility defended by trained military personnel and designed to be secure against rebellion. They had accomplished this using nothing but their intelligence, their refusal to surrender, and their ability to turn any tool into a weapon. The political ramifications were immediate and profound. Alien governments that had been planning to implement their own human control programs quietly abandoned those plans. Species that had viewed humans as useful but harmless labor began reassessing their security protocols. The hegemony found itself facing demands for reparations and criminal investigations from dozens of planetary governments. But the most significant change was in humanity itself. Sarah Chen returned to Earth to find that her daughter had joined Earth Space Navy's Intelligence Division, specializing in resistance operations and civilian defense. Tom Rodriguez was recruited to design new military technologies based on his improvised weapons systems. Dr. Foster became the leading expert on defensive biological warfare. Maria Santos established the communication networks that would link human settlements across the galaxy. The survivors of Kepler 442b became the foundation of a new human military doctrine. Every human civilian was a potential resistance fighter, every human settlement was a potential fortress, and any attempt to systematically oppress humanity would face not just military retaliation, but the complete determination of an entire species to never be victims again. The galaxy had learned a fundamental truth about humans that would shape interstellar relations for centuries: they were not just another species to be managed or exploited. They were the species that, when enraged, could turn anything into a weapon and anyone into a soldier. The hegemony had wanted to solve their human problem through systematic oppression. Instead, they had created something far more dangerous, a human species that now understood exactly how formidable they could be when they stopped trying to get along with everyone and started fighting for their survival. The age of humanity as victims was over. The age of humanity as a force that no alien species would ever underestimate had begun. And it had all started with one mining station where ordinary humans decided they had been pushed far enough.